Welcome to another episode of our podcast. Today on Top Lines and Tales, we're talking with a dynasty amongst the cattle industry, the Adam family from Newhouse of Glamis. So welcome Kay, Bob, Andrew and James Adam.
Hello.
Hello there. Hello.
The name Bob Adam is world famous and synonymous with some of the greatest Aberdeen Angus cattle of all time. And he was your grandfather, Bob. They're big shoes to fill.
Big shoes, but everyone has shoes to fill of some kind. So
Newhouse is situated near Glamis Castle, the former home, of course, of the Queen Mother. There's been a herd of Aberdeen Angus cattle at Glamis Castle since 1876, owned by the 13th Earl of Strathmore, otherwise, of course, known as the Bowes-Lyon family, which rose and fell, but continued through into the 50s. But I believe Bob's father was running a tenanted farm in Perthshire, and Bob saved his money to buy his first Angus cow in 1933. She was a Jury Erica of Harveston, a canny purchase as it proved.
Yes, my grandfather was at a farm at Doon in the Carse of Stirling, and he worked as a clerk in the Kildene auction markets at Stirling, and then moved up here with his wife. And my father, Drew Adam, as a baby in 1937, we got the tenancy at Newhouse.
And going back to the first purchase from Harveston, your grandfather Bob and Ernest Kerr became friends, I think. And Ernest Kerr was a very, very clever man, and he must have learned a lot from him. We're hoping to be discussing him on a future podcast.
Yeah, no, I think got a good bond going between the two of them and a good friendship. And I think they kind of rattled pedigrees off of one another, and I think grandfather would learn a lot from him, just in line breeding and things.
And Bob then bought two more cows from the Sandy Now dispersal in the Borders. And back then, Sandy Now was run by Tom Templeton, older brother of Matthew Templeton from the famed Charterhouse herd. And our listeners may recognise the name of Sandy Now, which is now run by Malcolm Stewart and his brother, who featured in our Smithfield Sheep podcast a while ago. And these two cows were Estroma of Sandy Now and Edwina V of Kilmarnock, who came for 305 guineas, and the Newhouse prefix was started. The latter of these would be the birth of the Edwina family, for which Newhouse became very famous.
Yeah, I think the Edwina lines are still going today.
Bob understood line breeding, though, didn't he? I think under the tutorage of Kerr, and having already line bred a few stock bulls in the 1950s, he bought a bull out of the same family as that original Jury Erica cow, a bull called Everill of Harveston, for 5,000 guineas. And that was a big price even back then, but the bull clicked with her and her daughters, and the prices just started to come in for the sons. Bulls 7,000 to New Zealand and a 5,000 bull to Kinermany, and he left great females as well. And then he sold the bull for export and kept a son back in the herd instead. And in 1954, Bob broke the Aberdeen Angus breed record with Newhouse Paragon at 11,500 guineas to Sir William Roots at Stipe. And for those who don't know, Sir William made his fortune in car manufacturing, owning brands such as Hillman and Sunbeam, Talbot and Comma lorries, and he was a keen Angus breeder. And there were quite a few of these wealthy men around at the time, though. They'd really help with the trade, wouldn't they, Bob?
Oh yeah, they would have cash to spend, and then, farming was not a sin in those days where it is now, I think, breeding cattle. So, it was good to be involved in agriculture then, I think.
By 1956, the noted historians Barclay and Keith, in their history book, said that Newhouse had sold 30 bulls through Perth over its 20-year span to average 3,800 guineas. And that was just from 3 cows to start over the 20 years. It's an astonishing achievement already.
Yeah, even today would be a decent enough average, but in those days that would be phenomenal average, I would say.
Certainly for 30 bulls, yeah. And then came a bull in 1958 that changed the job again. He was called Juville Eric of Manor Hill, and he was just third in his class at Perth, and Bob teamed up with his pal Alan Grant at the Thorn, and they paid 12,000 for him. And it was quite a surprise to everybody, but what they didn't realise is that Bob had sold Tom Todd, the mother, in calf just a year earlier, and maybe I guess he wished he hadn't.
Yeah, just sod's law, I suppose. But if it's a good enough bull to buy, you want to buy it. So they knew the breeding, and as you say, it'd be line breeding. So they knew what it was all about. So
Sure, and they're bringing a new prefix, I suppose, back into their own pedigrees.
mhm.
And Juville Eric was from the Jury Erica line, so when he crossed back in, everything just clicked as if like magic. And so many lessons can be learned from this. He's not taking a chance at all. This thing is completely calculated.
I think looking back in some of the files that we have in the office, Bob's grandfather, Papa, as he's affectionately known, there's still to this day lots of paperwork, lots of pedigrees scribed out in the most wonderful handwriting, because he had the most wonderful handwriting. And so I think, it was a well thought out operation that he was performing.
Certainly, I think that probably goes without saying. And between Newhouse and Thorne, then from this bull, Juville Eric of Manor Hill, his first crop of calves in Perth in 1960, 6 from each herd, came into just short of 100,000 guineas, and that's absolutely astonishing. An average of 8,000 guineas for 12 bulls. And Bert Rugg said they were just like peas in a pod, so the breeding really was working.
Yep, great average. Nowadays you would dream of averages like that. So, in those days, I don't know what the conversion rate would be, but it would be a phenomenal amount of money if it was converted into today's money.
You'd about stick a nought on the end of it now, Bob, I think.
Well, possibly. Probably, I would say.
And there was a son of his Newhouse Jura Eric, and we looked at him on our Top Lines and Tails page. He sold for 28,000 guineas to Ashley, who then won everything with him after that. And incidentally, Keith Bromley at Ashley, there's another wealthy magnate for you. He owned Russell Bromley's shoes.
Well, I don't know if Kay has any, but I would doubt it.
I once had a pair of boots, actually.
And then Ashley sold him to the USA, where a third share went to be sold for $350,000, so they could claim that he was the first $1 million bull. This Angus thing was starting to go stratospheric by now.
Yep, that's a lot of money.
And then Bob did the same with the Edwina family by bringing in a bull called Everil of Wandle from Josh Taylor. Jim Stobo dressed that bull, and he told me that they were quite shell-shocked when it made 29,000 guineas, beating Jura Eric's price, which I think it sold 20 minutes earlier. But again, Bob knew it would knit back into those Edwinas, and it did.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Newhouse only ever had 3 female families, didn't they?
I think so. Again, it's before my time, but it's only ever 3 families you hear about anyway.
So that was the 3 families. That was the Jury Erica and the Edwinas, and then the final family came again from Harveston in 1960 from their dispersal, and for 5,500 he got a Joanna Erica. And it was actually his wife, your grandmother, Bob, that bought this beast, and it was the start of a new prefix at Newhouse under the Glams prefix.
Yep. It was Granny that bought that one. I don't know if she'd spoken to my grandfather about it or not, or whether this was on her own doing or what. We're not too sure, but it was certainly chapped down to her anyway.
And it caused a bit of a stooshy at the time, because I think it was not only was it breed record for an Aberdeen Angus female, it was the most money ever paid by a woman for a cow.
All right.
And her progeny, as I said, was run under the Grams prefix for a while, so they must have claimed it back from the laird by then, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure when the Bowes Lions gave up the Anguses at the castle, but they certainly had the prefix at the time.
So then the first calf of the Joanna Erica was the 34,000 Jarvis Eric, and he sold to Blackwatch Farms. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. It's unbelievable.
No, beginner's luck, you could say, for her.
I don't think there's luck involved in this at all. And as the 60s went on, the money flowed in, especially from the Americans. And Blackwatch came and bought some females, I know, and Bob had always said you never sell your best females. They must have paid very dearly for those ones.
That I don't know, but we never had a lot of Anguses here, so they always kept the herd quite small and select, so there could have been, surplus females would just be sold off at some stage.
For a good price.
Yeah, well, possibly.
And with the money coming in, would that be round about the time he started investing in farms?
Well, we bought Lochton, I'm not sure what year exactly we bought Lochton Farm, just above Cooper Angus. It was at Abernight. It was a dairy farm, kind of upland grass mainly. It had a herd of Ayrshire cows on it, milking Ayrshire cows. Then it was sold in the early 80s when we got the chance to buy Newhouse. We were just tenants at Newhouse and Murleywell Farm, and we got a chance of buying it, so Lochton Farm was sold and Newhouse was bought then.
Going back to the cattle, Bob found it much harder to buy bulls back then, one for each family that were good enough.
Yeah, again, this line breeding, they were just hard to come across. Just as it is these days, everyone wants a certain bull, and it's just trying to get the right bull for the right cows.
Newhouse Judax Eric sold to Doonside in 1964 for a big price, and then 2 sons were bought back off of him. The first one, 20,000, was actually in partnership with Blackwatch Farms, and he was used on the Jury Erica family and then shipped off over the Atlantic after that. And there'd be no AI back then, but it'd be quite commonplace to buy bulls in these sort of partnerships.
Yeah, they'd get the use of them for 1 year, then they would do all their tests and that, then get exported after that, and that way they were made sure they were fertile and working.
And Doonside then bought a couple of top price sons back again, and that was how it works, and it still does to a degree, doesn't it, in certain breeds?
Yeah, lines that'll tick with your herd, and you just keep going back and hope it keeps clicking.
There was so many lessons that to be learnt about line breeding from Bob, and information that he'd gleaned from Kerr and the Collings brothers and Bakewell before then, and yet still a lot of folks don't understand the basics of line breeding.
No, it's either line breeding or inbreeding, so it's a fine line.
To be fair, some breeds respond better to close breeding than others, though, don't they? And it doesn't work in all breeds, certainly. Suffolks and Blackies are very closely bred. Texels, it doesn't seem to work at all. How does that work nowadays with your Charolais and your Limousins?
The Charolais, there'd be quite a bit of line breeding at the start of the Charolais with Tattenhall Eclipse, with her sons. There was Impeccable and a couple other sons. They were widely used through the Charolais and crisscrossed right through in the early days. We had Fleet's Rascal. I can't remember if Rascal was an Impeccable son. I think he was.
He was, yeah. Go back to the Angus, and Drew told me that Bob's biggest problem that the cows were so genetically fixed that it was almost impossible to find a bull out with the family that would improve them. He was a victim of his own success, really.
Yeah, I think the cows were quite dominant, to be fair. And as you say, the genetics in them, they'd be so tight. It would just, you'd either have to have a complete outcross that might work, or you have to keep it as tight as you can, and the outcross was just too risky, I think.
And eventually the export market to the USA and South America dried up after the 1966 foot and mouth. And the bulls at that time were too small for the commercial home market, and in fact in the US they'd already started to change type to suit a different demand for beef, and the tax laws possibly changed as well. So a lot of herds were unloading, and the writing was on the wall by the end of the 60s, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people wanted bigger frames and less fat probably on the carcasses by then.
And Drew said that he sat on the Aberdeen Angus Council in 1965, and he put forward a proposal, I think himself and Tom Brewis, he said, that they could start an upgrading system or a grading up system using decent Frisian cattle to get some size and the milk back in. But it was overruled by the older school, and knowing what we know now with DNA testing, do you think that would have been a good thing?
Yeah, I think he spoke about that quite often. It was Humby Frisians he was going to, or that's what they were thinking about using. There must have been big square kind of cows, I presume. And, at least they would have known what was in them rather than going to Canada and getting, I don't know if it's Holsteins or whatever, but all the different breeds, you can correct it if you know what's there.
And you're right, some of the cattle that came in from Canada did carry a bit of Holstein and all sorts of other things. But Bob did go down that route though of the change, didn't he? And he had a bull called Ballycaher Noble as a Canadian-bred bull that came through Ireland, and he started to lift the size of them pretty much straight away. But Bob openly admitted that by getting them bigger, they were rapidly losing their quality, and that's a familiar statement, isn't it? Big isn't always better.
Yeah, you can see it. They got big and got plainer, but it's what the people wanted at the time. You had to change, so maybe not for the better, but the change was on the cards.
And the herd was eventually dispersed in 1982, and we know the follow-on from that was the best of the Edwiners going to Dave Smith at Shield Mains to great success, and I think one of the top Ericas went to Netherton, and these cattle still underpin many in the pedigrees today, don't they?
Yes, I had no. Dave, he knew cattle very well and knew the pedigrees inside out.
And there was also a man called Alex Herbage, I believe, came and bought a tub of heifers from me either before the sale or maybe the year after. Do you know anything about him?
Yeah, I remember seeing him. He was a huge man in all senses of the word. He bought the last of the yearling heifers. I think there was 8 of them or something. And he bought them for his herd up the A9 up in the Highlands there. But he ended up in the jail, I think. So.
He did. He went to jail for defrauding 46 million.
Yeah.
The shorthorn herd had already been previously sold to make way for the Charolais, but the Aberdeen Angus herd there sold for, I think, a record average at the time of, was it £4,200?
Yes, they sold really well. Apparently, I remember them being in the ring that's at Perth, and yeah, it was quite a sight to see them. To be fair.
And but Bob was a very influential man, though, and he wouldn't be frightened of putting his opinions forward. Some say he had quite a controlling hand in the breed back then, but he would advise many breeders that are what to buy, and advise folks maybe that's more of a bull suited to you, and not just necessarily his own animals. Just he was a guiding hand to a lot of people.
Yeah, he would do that. Then he'd guide them in the right directions, and he'd be thinking possibly if they have a good calf off of that one, I know where the progeny will be, sort of thing.
And certainly with an encyclopedic knowledge of the pedigrees and the breeders, he would know where all the good cattle were. You're quite right. And he was an exceptional judge as well. I'm told that his biggest judging feat was when he judged Perth for the second time in 1963. Up until then, it used to be a 2-day job because there were so many cattle, over 1,000 bulls to go at, and sometimes 100 in a class. And apparently, he just did it in the morning. He did all the classes in the morning and stopped for a coffee or a dram at lunchtime, and then did the championships in the afternoon and in time for tea.
Yeah, he just saw stock to start. His first glimpse, he had it judged straight away, sort of thing.
And he judged a lot, and judged Royal Smithfield Show, and he judged in Chicago and New Zealand, and they asked him, I believe, to judge Palermo Show in Argentina 5 times in a row, so they could kind of set a type, not dissimilar to a man, Walter Beggar, that we spoke about in the previous podcast in Chicago. But he declined. I think he wasn't keen on flying, was that right?
No, he wouldn't go on a plane at all. He just sailed everywhere. They would go cruising, go away for 2 or 3 months at a time, just the trips on boats, and that was their holidays, basically.
So to judge Palermo 5 times in a row, it'd be quite a time constraint for him, sure.
Yeah, there was plenty of people on the farm, and Dad, he was kind of running the farm by that time, so there was no hassles for him being away, really.
Nice work if you can get it, especially if they're paying for the transport.
Absolutely. Then he's going out there and he's chatting to the people and hopefully planting some seeds to sell some bulls, I would imagine.
When they were on their travels, obviously because they were by boat, they used to bring back lots of little souvenirs. So throughout this house that Bob and I stay in, there's various little matty dishes and things for catching ostriches and lots of little odd things that we think, where the hell did that come from? But everything's got a little meaning, and we even have our own personal black watch lighter as well. So lots of little Angus travelling mementos.
And you also have at Newhouse the first couple of herd books, the Aberdeen Angus herd books, and I think they were handwritten, or certainly there were handwritten notes in them. I remember Drew saying that a lot of the information in them wasn't correct, and people had sort of tried to correct it with a pencil.
Yep, that's correct. We've got the first. Well, we believe it's the first two anyway. They're printed copies. They're all scored out and handwritten with pencil and ink. And
Well, a lot of the stockmen back then would have a bad memory when it came to dates, and it's still let's say some of the birth dates would be a little bit fuzzy back then.
yes,
There's a whole we have a whole bookcase of books that belong to Papa Adam, and most of them I think came out of the smoking room at Harveston, is on the inside of the cover. Lots of different educational books and herd books and the shorthorns, the Anguses, and I think and we also have some old sale catalogues from Keeler along at Newtile.
Wow.
And from up in Aberdeen, Pillifuer, yeah. And there's one catalogue that's actually marked up. Yeah, there was sheep at it, but yeah, it's very interesting. Lots of these catalogues. We just came across them in a tin one day, and well worth a little read.
Indeed, and very, very collectible these days. But it's nice to know that they're still in a family and still in amongst the Adam dynasty. That's brilliant. And you mentioned sheep there briefly, Border Leicesters and Blackies, and that Bob bred both of those at Newhouse, and I think he broke the records. With both breeds at certain times, certainly 1600 for a Border Leicester in 1950. I saw that would be some trade back then, wouldn't it? More than a lot of bulls.
yeah, no, a tremendous trade, I would say. We had, I remember Dad saying we had a shepherd at Newhouse for the Border Leicesters, and we only had a flock of 23, so he wasn't overly busy.
And with the Blackies, the flock was started back in the 50s, and you had 18,000 for a Blackie too.
Yes, we started off with the Blackies at Bellity Farm up Glen Isla, and then in 71 or 72 we moved to Aldallan, now head of Aldallan, and that's where we are now. We're still there, a 2,500 acre Heather Hill farm. Well, there's still Blackies there, and the top price we had for shearlings is 18,000 off of them. Persia type. That wasn't a record, but we'd had records before that.
We had a few years ago one of our shepherds, the shepherd left, and it was just before lambing time. So it was a case of hands up, who wants to go up the glen and lamb the ewes. So I had the most sheep experience, so I set off in the caravan, and it was that point that we realised that our black faces up there were just about getting like our Angus were. They were just about getting too inbred, and they needed an outcross. So at that point, we decided to kind of stop doing Blackie tups. We got some South blood into them, and then from that point on, Bob he wanted always to start up some cheviots, so we managed to get some cheviot stock and bought yow lambs, and at Newhouse now we only have one guy working for us. It's all family down here, and there's only our shepherd Richard McCardle. That's the only guy that we have actually on the payroll now. So
other than Jean Patterson, our secretary, it's been secretary here for 56 years, I think.
Wow.
She was employed by Papa Adam. She's in her 80s now.
57, and still comes in on a Friday.
Oh, brilliant. So, Kay, your father, Alan Fotheringham, he ran cheviots too, and in fact he ran quite a few sheep, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, well actually, the cheviots that we have were his stock yows. After Dad passed away, Mum, the hill farm, the tenancy was given up, so Mum had to move on. So we actually bought, Dad had always been quite selective and bought good stock, so he'd always bought stock from Lairg, so we bought majority of the yows from there to start off our Old Alm flock, and then with yow lambs again going up to Lairg. That's how the sheep started. But no, Dad gave the boys some blue-faced Leicesters in 2004, so James would just be 4 years old when these 10 yows arrived, and I don't know if it was to keep me in a job, but it definitely was a good learning curve for the boys, and they did a lot of sheep young handling competitions and stuff when they were little, and that led them on to bigger stock. So no, Dad was he was a Limousin man through and through in the end, so yeah.
And just touching on the cheviots, we mentioned earlier on about line breeding, and I think you sold a tup for a decent bit of money, and then went and bought a son back of his, and he did you well.
Yeah, the first year we had cheviots, we sold Old Alan Psycho, and we bought a son back for a lot more than what we got for Psycho. The son was 10,000, and we used him, and this year we managed to, I think we had, was it 19?
18 average, 1,600.
Yeah. The cheviot job's a bit of a long wait. It's not. It's 2 shear when we sell the tups at Lairg. So, you know, we can be lucky. We can use that as a tup lamb if we spot it, and we can use them as a shearling. And then, it's a great breed to be involved in, actually.
So with the different breeds of sheep, and of course Glamis also had an excellent herd of shorthorns there, and had Perth champion in 1950. Was that right?
Yes, the shorthorns they stayed along at Murleywell Farm, the next farm along from Newhouse of Glamis.
And the bull was Glamis' benefactor, and he was exported to America, and later he sold for a world record price as well.
Yes, well, I remember reading in the Guinness Book of Records that they had a picture of Glamis' benefactor. I can't remember what year the Guinness Book of Records was, but I remember getting it for Christmas one year, and this picture of the bull was in it. So.
and the shorthorns, they said, was sold in 1969, which made way for the Charolais and opened up another whole chapter at Newhouse.
Yes, we've always run kind of 2 herds at Newhouse, although now we're kind of running 4 herds with the red Limousin. The black Limousin are run as separate herds, and the Charolais and now the Anguses. So,
going back to the Charolais, then, Bob, you said the shorthorns went to make way for the Charolais, and Drew saw the change coming. Where did the Charolais herd start?
The Charolais would have come in the early 70s, 73, 74 maybe. And thereabout, we got 2 cows. I remember, I wouldn't be at the primary school. We'd got 2 cows in from France, and before the calf, the 2 cattlemen at Newhouse were having to walk them on the halter just so they were loosened up for calving anyway. I remember having to chase them with a stick just to keep them going. So to start with, they all came in from France, yeah.
Drew was very keen on his Charolais, I believe.
He'd been chairman twice of the Charolais Society. Well, he was chairman when the World Congress was on and the convention was on in the UK, and then he was also the world president for a year.
The world president. Okay, that's a big accolade. And I'm told that when Dave Smith went into Charolais at Cambusbarron, he came to you guys to purchase the stock house from Newhouse, so you must have had some pretty good stock going right back then.
I had Dave and Alan McCaig, they came up and they got some heifers, and they would show a few heifers from ourselves as well, you know, the Newhouse heifers. So no, and they didn't have a lot of Charolais at Cambusbarron, but you know what they had was good stuff anyway.
Mm-hmm. And off went Newhouse again with now with the Charolais topping the sales again, and it's never really stopped. I don't think you guys weren't long before you were back at the top of that breed.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're really at the top of the breed. We'll have our turn now and again, but no, there's a lot of good Charolais breeders out there, and we've never seemed to manage to top the sales, but we generally have quite a good average.
Well, you've certainly hit 22,000. I see in 2010 when you had 6 bulls average 12,000. That's not far away from the top, Bob.
But no, that was a very, very good sale, that one. Yes, there were 5 of them were off of 1 bull as well, so that was very good. We've had 22,000 3 times in the Charolais. So.
And then, of course, you had the Limousins, and there'd been Limousins at Newhouse for a while, but then, Kay, didn't you arrive with some Limousins of your own?
Right, so when Bob and I got married, Dad gave me a cow and calf to bring up to Newhouse. Dad had actually tried to sell this cow and calf. He tried to sell her, didn't get enough for it, so he decided he would give her to me. But it was a really she got here, and well, there's actually been 121 offspring.
121.
There's been 121 offspring and that cow only ever had 1 heifer, the calf that came with her, Westhall Jan, she had 4 bull calves, and then Bob didn't like her and sold the cow. But luckily, Jan stayed in the herd, and there's 121 offspring. There's been about 60 bulls, and I think there's maybe about 12 females in the herd this now. But Jan was by de Gerc, you know that the French double muscle.
Yes.
So yeah, and she was one of the first ones that was given some black genetics over her. So a lot of our black genetics have originated from that family. So the only mistake I made was it was left in the Newhouse prefix. That's why when the boys came along, they definitely had to get it in a Glams prefix.
And did you say your dad gave the boys a Charolais cow as well? Is that right?
So Dad, in the New Perth market, he would buy a gardener cow. He would think she was going cheap, and would buy her. And anyway, he didn't have a bull for her, so we took her to Newhouse to get her bulled, and she was still in Dad's ownership at that time. But then foot and mouth came on the go, and she got stranded up here. So he passed her over to the boys, and she had a bull calf. She was a nice bull calf, and that bull, we named it well. We named it Glam's Benefactor.
After the record price shorthorn, of course.
And they took it to Perth, the new market in Perth, and got 10 grand for it. So, yeah, and it was quite a big thing that day because they were the 4th generation of Adams to sell at Perth market. Yeah. And
what age would they be back then?
Oh, they were just 7, 8 maybe not even as old as that.
They're with you now, so let's just a quick word with them. Boys, do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember it a wee bit. I remember it being a right cold day and thinking, what are we doing here?
Always a great childhood memory experience.
Andy, you're quite a keen cattleman. Do you still keep some of the Charolais under your prefix, or are they all just under Newhouse now?
We had some under our prefix, but unfortunately went through a stage of bulls not working for us, and we're quite strict here at the farm that the cows only miss 2 terms of the bulls. So unfortunately, my cows never went back in calves, so we ended up getting rid of them.
Okay. Bob and Kay, yes, your focus with the Limousins shifted more towards the black Limousins, and why was that?
I think the black Limmies, well, it was 96, Bob. Why did we do it?
Well, just purely because commercial breeders in Scotland generally like black cows, and that was the only reason. We thought we'll go for black cows. People will buy them for replacements at that time, so that was the reason. But there's been a few other benefits as well with it. As a rule, they'll be slightly heavier, and we've got the pollen factor in them as well.
Mm-hmm. It was also a fine excuse for Drew and Dad and another Keith Redpath, John Green from down south to go travelling and have. They travelled quite a bit over to some of the stock shows in Canada and America. Dad took myself and Hazel to Denver to the stock show there, so it added a bit of excitement into cattle breeding, and we were always looking for new genetics, and we were at Denver one year, Bob, myself and sister Hazel and her new husband, they were on honeymoon actually, and we saw a really nice bull calf in a carload, outside in a pen in a carload, and we really liked this bull. But there was no way we couldn't bring the genetics back over. But we found out some embryos had come into the south of England, and ended up purchasing. That was Tamar Valley Boscastle, he was homo black and homo polled, so that gave us a really good start because it's all about the genetics and this homozygous. We've got a bull in the bull pen that's now a lovely red bull, and his full brother was a black bull, so you never know what you're going to get. So there's a bit of excitement in the breeding with the black ones.
And you're calving just now as well, so you do go out there and you're hoping for black over red, is that right?
We're just hoping for a healthy calf first.
Okay.
No, the mission would be to breed a homozygous black, a homozygous polled bull with quite a big bum. So when that happens, we'll be happy, but it's not happened yet.
Well, it did come because you were the first to win Perth with a black Limousin bull in 2009, was that?
Yes, that's right, but he wasn't homozygous black. He was heterozygous black and heterozygous both. So he was black in colour, but that was all. But yeah, he went up to Keith Hewinson up in Orkney to breed commercial calves up there and for breeding females.
For 16,000 guineas.
Yep. No, it was top price that day for the Limousin.
And you've had a few at 16,000 guineas, I think.
Yeah, I think three or four. I think we've had at 16. We just can't seem to get past that barrier at the moment, but it's nice to get there.
It's not a bad yardstick to have to look to work to. Newhouse is a big operation these days, and your two sons are in the business. James, what's your involvement in this?
I mainly do the tractor work here at Newhouse.
And you run a fairly big arable unit there as well?
No, I wouldn't say of any great scale, but we do try to keep up with the big players.
And Andrew, going on to yourself, the two of you, as you mentioned, started in Aberdeen Angus, and as your mum said, that you saved your money from your Blue Leicesters, and fantastic achievement to get Aberdeen Angus back on Newhouse, and that was your doing between the two of you boys?
Yeah, no, that was both of us. We both sort of thought that we wanted to bring something of our own back into the farm, so we thought we'd go back down the Angus route. As youngsters, Aberdeen Angus Society runs a fantastic youth development programme. We've done that since a young age, and it's really through that got us interested in Angus's, really. So it's really down to that, thanks of us getting back into them.
I think the Aberdeen Angus Society was really, really clever that they have this Angus, the youth development programme going, because the amount of kids that enter into that programme that end up going to
a sale and buying.
Yeah, Stirling and buying an odd heifer, buying a cow. It's amazing, and I mean, I don't know why any of the other breeds haven't kicked onto it, but
you'll have gone in knowing of your great grandfather's heritage. You'll have done your homework before you went in there. What's the breeding in the cows that you've got there?
We've got 6 foundation females here at Newhouse. The first one we bought was a Tonley Emmeline. She was just a yearling heifer that we purchased at October sale. Weren't really there looking for one, but we were watching the inspection of the Anguses one day and seen her come through and thought she was a very correct animal, so we managed to buy her, and then we moved on to buying a Diana heifer from Richard and Carol Retty, which goes back to the great scale Diana line up in Orkney.
Which goes back to Nick Delia, I think, doesn't she? That goes to Canadian cow.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people speaking about that cow. An offspring of her was at the Highland one year and said she was a great big feminine cow, massive for the time. And
then you've managed to get yourselves a Newhouse Edwina from that, going back to that wonderful Edwina 112th line.
Yeah, we bought that when Dave Murray at Westhall was having his reduction sale at Stirling, and I went up to Dave's beforehand the sale and had a look around the cows with him, and I picked her out. She had a really nice heifer calf on the foot when I was up looking, and that's what caught my eye, and decided there that I was wanting her at the sale. So, and 4 or 5 generations back, she goes back to that 112 cow, and I've read a lot about her and heard a lot of folks speak about her, so it was good to get some of the old breeding back again.
Brian Wills was stockman at Newhouse for a while, a well-respected stockman, and he learnt his trade from Ian Anderson, and would you guys learnt a wee bit from him?
Well, when Brian was here, we were shipped off to boarding school by mother and father, so we were only at home on the weekends. But yeah, learnt a lot from Brian. A really great stockman at the time, and done a lot here. And also when I was younger, we had Roy Crockett was stockman here. Roy's been a big influence as well at teaching us how to go slowly about cattle and the manners of showing them and that.
Two good teachers there, I would say. Anyway, and Bob, if I can go on to you, the judging wise, Bob, you judged just about everything, but weren't you not the youngest person to judge Perth bull sales? Would I be right?
According to Claire Powell, anyway, I am. So. There'll be younger judges now that will judge the May sales and that, but it was October '94 I judged. It was 222 or something bulls to judge in the Limousin that year.
What age would you be then, Bob?
25 I was.
And I believe you've judged Charolais in France. There's not many people can give that one.
Yeah, it was, well, it's a young kind of breeders thing. It was at Moulin, the bull show at Moulin. There was only 3 or 4 classes. It wasn't a big job to do, to be fair.
I've been at a few of those sales with cattle and sheep in France well, I live in France now, as you know, but they don't take it quite as seriously as, well, not quite as seriously isn't the right word, but they do go about it a slightly different way, don't they?
Yeah, they're a bit more casual about the whole thing.
Indeed. And Kay, you've judged again a lot, and you judged quite a few interbreeds.
Yeah, the Burke Trophy at the Three Counties show was a big thing for me to judge. That was a big interbreed, and always remembered the Burke Trophy. But no, I judged the Tullamore, the national Limousin show in Southern Ireland. That was a full day's judging. Judged at the Balmoral, that was interbreeds. Yeah, from right up to Orkney to Isla to some of the best shows are the wee local shows for judging. Yeah, I enjoy it. I get really nervous before I do it, and when I'm in the ring, I'm fine. But before it, don't ask. I can't eat my breakfast or anything. So I'm quite happy when a judging job comes in the snout that's got Andrew's name on it and not mine.
So Andrew, you've followed on the family tradition, and you've been a pretty good judge yourself. And didn't you win something recently? Can you tell us about?
Yeah, won the beef individual stock judging at the Highland Show, the last Highland Show there, 2019 it was.
What did that entail?
It was judging 4 classes of beef in the morning. I can't remember what breeds it was, but we had to do 2 sets of reasons after it too, and it obviously did a good job and managed to come out on top.
You're in good company there, I'm sure, along with a lot of your friends there, but something that'll stand you in good stead. And as your mum said, it'll be you judging all these shows shortly, and she can have a bit of time off and maybe go and watch you.
Yeah, maybe anyway. Yeah, I've done a wee bit of local summer shows, but not too many. I had more for last year, but unfortunately the COVID's put an end to that for this now.
Well, I think that last year's judges are rolled over to this year, but then let's hope we get some shows this year. Huh?
Yeah, fingers crossed anyway.
And the cattle in America have got smaller now, and they're being paid a premium on marbling and eating quality, and all about bigger ribs and less back end. And how do you see the future of the breeds that you guys are in, sort of 3 of the main breeds in the UK? And who's going to answer this one? How do you see the future of your 3 breeds in the UK?
Sounds like a question for Mum.
No. Andrew should be answering this. He won 2 trips to Canada and worked out in a ranch in Canada. He should know these things.
Come on, Andrew, on you go.
Well, might go back to maybe not as extreme as what it used to be back in the day, but certainly go smaller. Maybe they're not looking for as big rough animals anymore. And I think the people are wanting to go down the grass-fed route, so we're trying to breed as fleshy bulls that we can do here, so we can sell them to the producers and go on and do that job for them anyway.
And Kay, we mentioned the shows briefly, and I know you're involved in the Royal Highland Show, and you're in charge of the cattle lines these days. It's a massive task that you've had to take on there. Must have been daunting and quite exciting as well.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. It's been part of the board. Yeah, it's a big learning curve, and the Highland Show is just part of the thing that Royal Highland and Agricultural Society does. But I was fortunate to land in the cattle stewarding group, which was great, and also have young farmers under my hat as well, which can give me more hassle. But no, we're hoping, plans are underway. We're planning for a show this year, but it'll just all depend on what the COVID situation, how the rules go. But people are needing the shows, and the great loss of not having a Highland show last year was really felt by so many people. So.
Obviously, we mentioned the COVID pandemic has changed the way that the pedigree stock are being bought and sold now, with some of the sales being cancelled and the shows not being there, and more private sales and online auctions now. And I'll probably go to Andrew on this one. Do you think this is here to stay, Andrew?
I think the way that it's going, it's quite a good way actually. Or well, certainly with the more on-farm sales, you're letting the person buying the bull from you come onto farm and have a look at the mother and have a look at the father, and you can discuss it. You have more time to discuss what they're and looking for, and manage to try and help them out a bit more. But we could do with the sales starting to come back to normal again. We're all missing the atmosphere of taking bulls to the bull sales and seeing how we get on at the show, and if you have a good one, the nerves of taking it up to the sale ring.
And Kay, you run a big social media presence with the Newhouse herd.
Yeah, we started a Facebook page a while ago now, and I'm so thankful that we actually started it, because we have around about 7,500 followers. It was a godsend last May when we had no sales. You know, the sales were cancelled. We had 2 bulls entered on an online sale in Carlisle, like bull eBay, and then the Stirling catalogue was just, it was just an online catalogue. So the social media definitely was a big plus point for us, and I've got quite a decent camera. I like taking pictures, so we can take a few pictures, we do videos, and it's amazing how the interest you can build. So no, we were fortunate enough to be already in a good position that way.
Good, and good luck with that. We've got the Stirling bull sales around the corner now, and one that's been postponed already. Let's hope that they all go ahead. And I know you've got a big line of bulls to come in this year, I think.
Yeah, well, we had the lineup, but we've got 3 sold already. So that's 3 less to worry about. But it's nice to get to the sales. If you've got a decent bull, there's nothing better than putting it up against some competition. And if we don't get back to the auctions, it's going to be valuing bulls at home is fine, but are we getting it right? That's the thing. So
they're only worth what 2 people are prepared to pay. That's what they say, isn't it? Well, let's hope it all gets back to normal pretty soon. Running these podcasts just for the last month or 2, I've noticed a recurring theme, and that the benchmark for truly great cattle breeders is that they have a variety of breeds, a variety of species, and they exceed at them all. And Bob Adams certainly fitted into that mould, and it appears that Newhouse is doing the very same thing. You guys seem to be into a lot of things and be coming up the top of all of them, and that's a great credit to you.
I've got a lot of eggs in the basket. That's you have to spread the load a wee bit.
Well, long may it continue, and you're doing exceptionally well, and I appreciate your time talking to me today, and thank you very much to all of you.
No, thank you, Andrew.
Thank
right.
You, Andy.